Hello, and welcome to Courtgames, a Legend of the Five Rings podcast, funded by the Legend of the Five Rings Discord Patreon.
This podcast will focus on the role-playing game stories and lore for Legend of the Five Rings.
I'm Korva.
I'm Kikita Kaori, and we have a special guest today. Hi, Marie.
Hi. It's good to be back here.
Yep, we wanted to introduce Marie Brennan, who is a writer for Legend of the Five Rings, and she is coming on to talk to us about her new novel, Night Parade of 100 Demons, which is coming out from Agonies Press, February 2nd, 2021, right?
Yep, not very far from now at all.
Tell us a little bit about Night Parade. If you were pitching it to our audience, how would you go?
I'm terrible at the elevator pitch approach to things. If you ask me to sum up a book in 3 paragraphs, I can do that, but 3 sentences is the hard part. But the short version is that there are strange supernatural disturbances happening in a rural mining village in the Dragon Mountains. And so a Dragon Shugenja is sent to investigate and discovers that a Phoenix scholar has also heard about what's going on and has wandered up there to take a look, which he really wishes that guy weren't there. And anybody who knows their Japanese folklore and such may recognize the phrase Night Parade of 100 Demons. Spoiler, that's what's causing the disturbances. So, it's not meant to be a surprise to the reader. I put it right here in the title. But so there's a yokai, which is a kind of catch-all term for a bunch of supernatural sorts of creatures in Japanese folklore. A whole lot of stuff with different yokai causing problems in the village.
Would you consider this an adventure story? Would you consider it a mystery or a romance or something else?
I wouldn't call it an adventure, probably in the sense that people think of that. This is not the kind of book where there's like a fight scene or a chase or something like that every 50 pages. It is definitely a slower burn than that. It builds up to some exciting stuff at the end, but it is more of an investigation early on. I think of the terms mystery and romance in 2 senses. One is, what are the elements going into the story, and the other is mystery and romance as genres. So it's not a mystery in the genre sense, because like I said, I put the answer to the mystery in the title of the book. This is not the kind of thing where if the reader pays attention to the clues along the way, they may piece it together. It's not that kind of mystery, though it is an investigation. And romance-wise, my personal taste with romance is I find it more romantic when it is the B-plot to something else, because just my taste in what I attach to is I like it when the characters are working together on something important and their attachment to each other builds during the course of that, rather than it being the romance is the A-plot and the other thing is the B-plot. So in those structural terms, it's not a genre romance, but there is definitely a romantic subplot. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that, because, you pretty much would have had to, I think, disable your gaydar completely not to realize that the first time Ryotora lays eyes on Second, he's like, okay, I'm kind of attracted there. So, that is a strain throughout. But I would say, overall, the tone of it is more toward the investigative mystery end of things, because even if the reader knows what's going on, there are reasons why the characters do not. And so they're trying to find out what's the cause of all of this? And then once they know that, the even more important question, what do we do about it?
Did you draw from any European sources for inspiration? Our listener asked, how do you approach cross-cultural mixing of ideas and languages?
So nothing in terms of specific story material came from Europe. Now, obviously, I am an English language writer, American. The kinds of stories I tell are definitely going to be more in the Western tradition of storytelling. I'm not claiming that structurally this is a really Japanese or East Asian kind of story. And I'm writing for an English language market and so forth. So in that sense, there is going to be the European influence just because of the way that I tell stories. But I didn't do anything, like I mentioned knockers just a moment ago. When I couldn't find anything in Japanese lore that was equivalent to a knocker, I did not then make up something to be like a knocker that I could then use. So none of the supernatural stuff comes from that or anything like that. One of the things that gets pointed to as a difference between Eastern and Western storytelling is, Eastern storytelling traditionally and stereotypically, not in the negative sense, but is more comfortable with the tragic and bittersweet endings. We have enough tragedy in the world around us. I'm going to write an ending where people are happy, where things go well. And not doing what I think L5R has done from time to time and really, fetishizing the nobody ever gets to be happy kind of idea. So I think in that sense, that's coming through, that I'm like, no, the characters way to have their cake and eat it too. They get to do their duty and also be happy. That's fine.
This story has a lot of discussion about the boundaries between different social classes. What is your vision, or how do you see the class structure in Rokugan work?
So it's an interesting setup because we don't get to see a lot of it, frankly, in most of the game fictions and even in the RPG, because the focus is heavily on samurai. And so you're going to be getting samurai are the ones who are the main characters of the story, and samurai are mostly interacting with other samurai. And when peasants appear, they're in a walk-on role, they do something brief, which might be an important thing, but they're not like featured in the story. But with this one, literally for almost the entire book, Ryotora and Seken are literally the only samurai there, and they are surrounded by a village full of peasants. So it gave me an opportunity to explore that a lot more. And I definitely wanted to stay away from the thing that, again, you get this in the earlier editions of L5R, that kind of in that like 90s edgelord sort of way played up and if a peasant mouths off to a samurai or just doesn't even get out of the road fast enough, the samurai will cut him in half. I don't want to write that. I especially don't want to write that in a story that's about the samurai. Like, I might write that if I was writing a story with peasant protagonists.
Yeah.
Because then it's about how they feel about it and what they do about it, but not when the samurai are the focus. But I did want to explore a little bit some of the tensions there. With the dragon, it's come out in the RPG fictions, or in the game fictions, that because the dragon have this problem of their birth rate is declining, number one, they straight up don't have enough children. And it's happening sometimes that samurai families who don't have a kid, like, there are agasha who will travel around and test peasant children for spiritual merit. And if they have enough merit, then the kid gets taken off to be adopted and raised as a samurai. Which is something where that kind of thing wasn't out of the question in historical Japan, because the class boundaries were a lot more permeable in Japan than they tend to be represented as in L5R. But it means that for the dragon, there's this weird thing going on there where they're like, yeah, we do this thing and we really hope nobody notices. And so it means that Ryotora, like, he doesn't see the peasants as his equals exactly, but there is a very distinct sense of they are people to him, that he cares about them as people rather than being half people, the heimin term. And second, it's not that he doesn't see peasants as people, it's more that he doesn't see them. Like, I wanted to have somebody who wasn't all, yay, peasants, I'm great with them. And so Seken's he is so much a fish out of water in that village. He's a scholar, he's a courtier, he's used to being in cities and libraries. And now he's in this mining village surrounded by illiterate people. And he doesn't know how to fit in or deal with any of that. So I enjoyed playing with that a little bit so that it wouldn't just be all... I remember seeing this in the 4th edition RPG books, where I swear every clan's write-up went out of its way to say how this clan, unlike those other clans, wasn't a bunch of dicks to their peasants. And I understand it, because, frankly, I support the fact that lots of players don't want to play that guy who's going to cut the peasant in half for not bowing fast enough. That's not a behavior that I would want to play at for fun. I don't see any enjoyment in that. But I did want to show that class differences are still a real thing, and so there's a moment where Ryotora goes off on Seken because Seken appears to just not even know the names of most of the peasants around him. And Ryotora's like, they have names, and I know you're not too stupid to remember them because you're actually really smart. It's just because you don't even think of it. So that's the kind of thing that I tried to play.
Can you see yourself writing some more about these two individuals?
I can, yeah. I don't know yet officially whether that will happen, but I do have an idea for a sequel, and Aconite has shown interest in working with me again, so I'm hoping that will wind up going through, but I don't know for sure yet if it will. Yeah, when they first asked me, like early on before I had even written the first book, there was a question of, and if it should become a thing, would you be willing to do like more books of these characters? And it took all of about 15 seconds for my brain to say, there's also this thing in Japanese folklore called the Game of 100 Candles.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, clearly I've got to use that as the title for the second book and do something with that.
That would be neat.
Yeah, if I get a chance to do that. For people who don't know, the Game of 100 Candles is this, like, party game where you light 100 candles or lanterns in one room of the house, and then you go sit in another room. Oh, and you also put a mirror in there with those candles. And you go into another room, and people tell stories, and specifically kaidan, which are these, like, spooky, supernatural kind of stories. And after you tell your kaidan, you get up, you go to the other room, you blow out one of the candles, and you look in the mirror. And as this goes along and the room gets dimmer and dimmer, it starts to, like, thin the veil to the world of supernatural things, and so it gets, like, scarier and more, what if something jumps out at you? It's very much a scary stories to tell in the dark kind of thing. Clearly there's opportunity to do something with that in Rokugan. Though, there's a part of me that goes, okay, so imagine that you do that, and then Aconite says, great, we would love you to do a third book. I'm out of things that involve the word 100. The other thing I did find when I was, because it wasn't originally set that this was going to be a Dragon Phoenix story, what I said to Lottie was, I know you're planning some of the other novels. Tell me what hasn't been or what isn't being done in these other novels, and I'll set my story there. So I was told, like, yeah, don't do Crane, because we've got this, like, kind of foppish Crane detective dude going on. Looking through the Atlas of Rokugan, I think it was that book, looking for interesting places to set the story before I wound up inventing my own village. And I want to say it's Brittle Flower City, I might be misremembering. It has the Bazaar of 100 Fortunes.
Ooh.
And now that's something that, to my knowledge, is not drawn from anything in the real-world lore, but I might have to use that one if I wind up doing a third book. This is very far in the future, and I have bigger things to worry about right now, but as soon as you lock yourself into a structure, this is like the chapters thing. If you name 2 books the noun of 100 nouns, then everything's gotta be the noun of 100 nouns.
I have to say, I really hope one or more of these books that are coming out from Aconite do form long, successful series. Because I think that would just be so good for L5R as a whole.
Yeah. It's fun to be able to develop stuff in more depth. Like, one of the things that I would want to do with a sequel is, okay, so the first book involves Seken going to a rural mining village in Dragonlands and being the fish out of water. And so clearly the second book would need to send Ryotora to Seken's home, and now he's, like, at court in Phoenix Lands, and he's the one going, oh god, I don't know what to do.
Exactly. If you do the 100 candles, and it's a big highfalutin party full of full-on
people who outrank Ryotora by, like, leaps and bounds.
Yeah. So, why don't you give us a story, dragon?
Yeah, exactly. And you got somebody at that party would be like, why don't you tell us the story of that thing that happened with the night parade? He's like, no. We are not risking that.
Don't talk about that one. No.
That is a bad idea.